I'm Vinny Politan. Great to have you with us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to talk about Alec Baldwin tonight. And it's amazing. Every time we talk about Alec Baldwin on this show, it causes some controversy in the way folks at home and folks on the show react to Alec Baldwin. First of all, when we do it in the 9 o'clock hour with lawyers, let me tell you, my lawyer guests, they love Alec Baldwin. I mean, anytime we do the story with them, sometimes they question whether or not Alec Baldwin should even be sued, whether or not he's even liable for what happened here in a civil sense. I'm talking about being sued for money, wrongful death, everything that goes along with that, that he's not responsible. There's no way my lawyer guests ever believe that he should be criminally charged for anything. Then it's a whole different scenario when I talk to guests who aren't necessarily lawyers or just lawyers. Sometimes they're folks who are gun experts, actors I've spoken to, and all of them look at the situation a lot differently. Now, let me admit, I'm not a huge fan of Alec Baldwin's. I have to lay that out there, right? But that does not necessarily gauge the way I see a case. My viewpoint of this case is that Alec Baldwin should not be treated differently because he's an actor. Whether that means going after him because he's an actor or letting him slide because he's an actor. To me, Alec Baldwin is a man with a gun in his hand, period. Period. You know, those same lawyers who don't want Alec Baldwin charged want just about every police officer charged when something goes wrong and they have a gun in their hand, whether they think it's a gun or they think it's a taser, etc. And I get it. And I don't want to be misunderstood in my analysis of where we are so far in this case. My analysis is that Alec Baldwin should be treated the same as a police officer. Alec Baldwin should be treated the same as a citizen, anyone who has killed someone with a gun in their hand. The analysis is the same, the absolute same, yet I always hear people saying, well, but he was an actor just doing his job. It's somebody else's responsibility. Well, that doesn't mean they're not responsible, but there can be more than one person responsible. There could be more than one person liable. At the end of the day, it was his hand that was holding the gun. And we know what happened. So that's all. I'm not saying that he should or shouldn't be charged at this point. The investigation is not over. It's been a really long investigation since October 21st of last year. We're coming upon a year now on this thing. So I don't know what the text messages say. I don't know what the eyewitnesses have necessarily said. I've read statements and heard statements from the armorer, from Alec Baldwin, and I still don't have a super clear picture of what exactly happened here and how it happened. So let's see. We did get some additional information that was released from the FBI. Let's take a look at it. This is significant. This is an FBI report regarding the accidental discharge testing. When they tested the gun that Alec Baldwin had in his hand, when the hammer was at a 1/4 and 1/2 cock position, could not be made to fire without the pull of the trigger. When the hammer was at a full cocked position, it could not be made to fire without a pull of the trigger. Now, this is important, making a lot of headlines because of what Alec Baldwin said. Back in December, Alec Baldwin sat down for an exclusive interview with George Stephanopoulos at ABC News, where he said that he cocked the gun, let go of the hammer, and the gun went off. And he insisted he did not pull the trigger.
And I cocked the gun, I go, can you see that? Can you see that? Can you see that? And she says, and then I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off. I let go of the hammer of the gun and the gun goes off.
At the moment.
That was the moment the gun went off, yeah. That was the moment the gun went off.
It wasn't in the script for the trigger to be pulled.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them, never.
And that's where we are tonight, right? This investigation isn't over, but that's Alec Baldwin's version of what happened that night. And now you've got the FBI testing the gun that he used. Well, let's get a little more clarity. Let's bring in our experts. Joining me in Woodlands, Texas, former senior special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration and the founder and CEO of Global Security Group, David Katz, is with us. And in Salt Lake City, Utah, movie set expert, technical director, former Salt Lake City police officer, Rob Joseph. Great to see you both tonight.
Hey, guys.
Let's start with the first, I guess, question here. Is the FBI tests this gun, David? They take a look at it. They do all the appropriate tests. And they seem to come to the conclusion that you've got to pull the trigger for the gun to fire. But Alec Baldwin was very clear in what he said actually happened. What are your thoughts about his statement and the FBI and everything that you know in all your years of experience in training and teaching and everything else?
The gun does not go bang unless the finger is on the trigger, at least not that particular gun. Are there other types of firearms with some catastrophic mechanical failure, like a striker-fired weapon that may end up getting dropped or something? Yes, that gun can only fire if the trigger is depressed. I'm not the most familiar person with that particular weapon, so I had to research a little bit. There's no internal safety. In other words, there's no transfer bar or any other mechanism that would stop, that would add a level of safety to that weapon. However, there are positions, and the FBI talked about them: quarter cock, half cock. Once the hammer starts coming back, and if for those of your viewers who understand how a bullet works, there's a primer on the back of the shell casing. That primer's got to be struck with a firing pin. The firing pin is on the hammer. So for that firing pin to be struck and the gun to go boom, the firing pin's got to go this way when the hammer is falling. And the only way the hammer falls is if the trigger's in the rear position. Now, he might have cocked the weapon with his finger on the trigger, and then when he released it, sure, it's going to go forward and go bang. But the finger was on the trigger. There is no other way to make it bang unless unless the hammer's forward and you whack it with a hammer or something, then it'll also go off. But that's not this case.
Rob Joseph, your thoughts about what we're learning now from this FBI report compared to what Alec Baldwin said happened?
Yeah, I agree with the statements just made there. Your finger has to be on the trigger for that gun to discharge. And I think, we've been all pretty consistent with that conclusion, or that outcome finding that, once the forensics are done on this gun, it will be proven that this gun could not be discharged without the pressing of the trigger. And I think Alec Baldwin's problem here is he probably did something that his legal counsel told him not to do, and that's talk. And he should not have been out there making these types of statements that are now being proven to be inconsistent or untrue.
Okay, David, I want to get your reaction to another part of the report. It's a little more specific. It's a little more detailed. I'm not quite sure what they mean here, but here's what it says. It says, during this testing, portions of the trigger sear and cylinder stop fractured while the hammer was struck. The fracture of these internal components allowed the hammer to fall and the firing pin and detonated the primer. This was the only successful discharge during this testing, and it was not attributed to the fracture of internal components. It was attributed to the fracture of internal components, not the failure of the firearm or safety mechanisms. So I guess they're saying there it did fire at some point. So what does that mean?
They bashed the hammer with something hard. So it's a piece of metal that holds it's not really difficult to envision. The hammer's held back by a little piece of metal that if you take a hammer, for example, and smash the hammer back from the rearward, it'll break that. In this case, it clearly did. It broke the metal and sent it forward. That is basically, it's an additional safety in the internal workings. But this is not what happened. In other words, it was conceivable if the gun was cocked and let's say it had fallen from a height and landed on the back of the hammer, and then in that case, the hammer might have been set forward because it's under tension. but that's clearly not what happened. It didn't fall. He drew the weapon, he cocked the weapon. He most likely, I don't know for sure, clearly, probably had, because you see in the video clip you keep showing, his fingers on the trigger. That's probably the way he was practicing it. Cocked it as he came out, the fingers on the trigger, and he let it go, and bang, that's what happens. But the finger was clearly in the rearward position to make that happen.
And that video that we're seeing is part of the evidence in the case. That was recorded prior to the shooting, obviously, right? But this is before, I think they broke for lunch, then they came back after lunch and went back to rehearse the scene again.
Right.
So that's important video. I want to show you another video. This is from Stephen Wolf. He's a theatrical firearms safety expert who did a little demonstration that may more clearly show to us visually what we've been talking about here. Let's take a look.
Okay, so not plausible. On a single action revolver, when you pull the hammer back, which is an intentional act, click, 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 click. Now the hammer is set. When you pull the hammer back and let go, as you can see, I'm not holding this, the hammer doesn't go anywhere. When you press the trigger, which is, I'm going to do it with this finger so you can see what a minute act that is. It takes very little to press the trigger there. So option one, he pressed the trigger, but it was such a minor press that he wasn't aware that he had, ordered that signal from his brain. Or option B, he's holding the gun with the trigger depressed. Now, on this gun, it doesn't matter which order you go in. You can either cock the gun and you can fire it with the trigger, or you can press the trigger and then cock the gun. And if you release it at this point, it falls and the gun fires. So if, as he is cross-drawing, his finger is on the trigger, which he may have interpreted as just resting on the trigger, but with a 1 millimeter pull, that would be sufficient. Now he pulls the hammer back and then releases it. He doesn't have to press the trigger again if he's already got pressure on it in order for the gun to fire. And I think that's really a key point in this matter.
Rob Joseph, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, Olsey knows where they're just running their hand, the trigger, not the trigger, but
fanning
there, and it just fired. So this is what happened.
Now, I want to read something, and this is probably the most confusing, troubling part of this whole case and where we are right now. You've got the DA apparently spoke with Vanity Fair in an interview. And she says, before the FBI ever tested this gun, she spoke with some of the investigators in the office. And she says, then they visually showed me, says Carmack Altweez. She's the DA. You can pull the hammer back without actually pulling the trigger and without actually locking it. So you pull it back part way, it doesn't lock, and then if you let go, the firing pin can hit the primer of the bullet. And that can cause a live round of ammunition to fire. David Katz, your thoughts on that? I guess it's pulling it back 1/8 instead of 1/4, because as soon as you go to 1/4, it's gonna click, right?
Yeah. In the old days, before they had these additional positions, do you ever see the John Wayne movie, The Shootist? He talks about carrying 5 rounds in a 6-round pistol with a hammer resting on an empty chamber. That's because during the draw, if you start to pull the hammer back and let it go by accident, even without touching the trigger, it can go forward. Not this gun. Because the quarter position, if you look, Mr. Wolf did a great job there. In fact, that's what I was trying to explain. He's, one picture's worth 1,000 words. That movement back, you get the quarter cock right away. Less than that, there is not enough power going forward to detonate that primer. So she's absolutely mistaken on that.
So again, I want to make this super clear because this is a big, big point, because this is the DA who ultimately, when she gets all of the evidence, will make the decision on whether or not to proceed against Alec Baldwin or anyone else. Is that you're saying if you pull it back less than 1/4, 1/8, and the hammer, will spring back, it's not enough force. It will not create enough of a bang to allow that bullet to go.
And I guarantee you, the FBI tested that repeatedly.
And I think in the FBI report, it's clear that a quarter wasn't enough and a half wasn't enough for it to actually make the bullet go. So this, to me, so what are your thoughts? I've never fired a gun. I fired once in a shooting range, very controlled situation, very controlled. It was downstairs at an Italian eating club. It was all legit. It was in New York City, but it wasn't a pistol. I'll start with you, Rob, then I'll ask David. Rob, is there do you think it's possible for Alec Baldwin to be thinking about it, thinking that he didn't pull the trigger, or do you think it's impossible to not know your finger is on the trigger in a moment like that?
Well, this is why law enforcement trains with muscle memory, and you're constantly during training, your finger on the trigger, put it on the slide, not put your finger on the trigger until you're
Rob,
ready.
we've got a little issue with your audio. It's just cutting out. We're gonna fix that. We're gonna fix that. David Katz, your take on that? Alec Baldwin, very clear in his statement. Now we've seen sort of the facts, how the gun really works. Is it possible that in his mind he had no idea where his finger was, or in it couldn't do it? But he actually said his finger wasn't there, so he knew where it was, but it wasn't there. That's the part that I don't get.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to base my assessment on the video that keeps being shown. What Rob was talking about quite correctly is, as a former police officer, you have what's called either the master grip or indexing, or the safe cover mode. Point is, when we teach firearms safety, when you're covering someone, for example, your finger is indexed along the slide away from the trigger. Why? Because in a moment of excitement or during the stress of dealing with an armed individual, all it takes is a little pressure. Like on a Glock pistol, it's 5.5 pounds. This is even less. Single action replica pistol, it's going to be a lot less than that. So I would believe that he would be unaware that he's doing it, but I don't believe his statement saying my finger was nowhere near the trigger, based on that video that keeps rolling through, where he's drawing, where is his finger? It's on the trigger. And by the way, back then, there was no such thing, that's it right there. There's no such thing as the master grip, the indexing. They didn't do it back then. So you see where his finger is, sitting there, resting. Now, he may have thought, well, I didn't press it, but it just takes the lightest amount of pressure. And he may, in fairness, not have been aware, but I don't believe when he says, oh, it's nowhere near the trigger. I don't see how he remembers that.
All right, David Katz, Rob Joseph, going to stay with us. We're going to fix that audio. Promise you, Rob. When we come back, we've got a lot more to get to on Alec Baldwin, plus coming up in the next hour. In Fremont County, Idaho, doomsday mom Lori Daybell getting ready to go back to court fighting the grand jury indictment which seeks the death penalty. Tonight, we'll take a closer look at this case and why prosecutors want Lori Daybell put in the death chamber.
Tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
Lori Vallow Daybell, back inside a courtroom. What new information will be uncovered? Don't miss a moment as this case gets closer to trial. The Doomsday Couple murder trial, motions hearing. Live coverage Tuesday at 11:10 Central, only on Court TV.
0 out of 10.
If you let go of the hammer and don't have any pressure on the trigger, the hammer will just stay where it is. You have got to have the trigger. However, that is to say that there's some reason why there should be a cartridge in this weapon to begin with. There is no reason in the world for there to be a cartridge of any kind in that weapon during a rehearsal.
That's actor John Schneider talking about, what we're talking about. Why did this happen? I mean, Helena Hutchins lost her life. There are kids growing up without a mom. We can't lose sight of that. Can't lose sight of that. So what is the level of responsibility? I think civil liability is clear. I don't even talk about that necessarily on the show. I talk about the criminal case because it's still being investigated. We're waiting to hear from the DA once the DA gets all of the information from investigators. Now, I want to talk about the bullet. Here is from the FBI report again. The bullet from Joel Souza, who was the surviving victim in this shooting. One bullet, two people. A 44/45 caliber lead flat-nosed bullet, which was fired from a barrel rifled with a right twist and was significantly damaged at the time of examination. Now, I want you to take a listen to Hannah Gutierrez. She's the armorer from the movie set. She's the one who's in charge of handling the weapons and getting them ready for the actors. Okay, here she is explaining what type of ammunition she had that day.
So I think everything was after lunch then. So after lunch, you get back, and that's when you loaded a dummy round. I mean, the blanks. No blanks were loaded. No, like all dummy today. Yeah, no blanks were loaded today. I was like getting ready for it. I had my fanny pack like full of like blanks and everything. But
okay. So when was the last time you loaded it?
I loaded it with the. So I loaded it with 5 of the dummy rounds before lunch, and there was one that wouldn't go in. And so when we got back from lunch, I took the like little cleaner guy, I cleaned it out really quick, and I put another dummy in there.
Okay, so there were 5 total in the gun.
Yeah.
Can you describe?
6. There was 6. Total.
6.
So there you hear the description. Now, we're not talking about blanks here. We're not talking about blanks. These are dummy rounds versus the actual live round, which caused the death, which killed Helena Hutchins, which was in the gun. Alec Baldwin, it's in his hand. I want to bring back in our guests, David Katz, Rob Joseph, still with us. To me, for us, what is the difference? Like, if you're handling and you're loading a gun, would you know the difference between a dummy round and a live round? Rob Joseph, I'll begin with you. Do they look different? Do they feel different? Would you know the difference before you put it into this revolver? Would you know the difference after you put it in the revolver and looked at it?
Well, the armor most definitely would. The actor might not. The director certainly might not. And I think in this instance, the armorer was not even allowed on the set during the rehearsal of this. The gun was pretty much turned over to the director. So definitely the armorer would. But as far as Alec Baldwin and the director, they might not know the distinction between the different types of rounds.
Let me ask you this, Rob. You know, the armorer's job is to make sure the gun is safe. If the armorer was doing their job and was handing the gun to Alec Baldwin, how do you demonstrate that a gun loaded with dummies is safe? How do you do that? How do you do that? Because I've spoken to actors and other folks, other directors, and they always say it's done in the presence of the actor himself. Like the actor either does it himself or is next to someone who's showing him that the gun is safe. So if the gun is loaded with dummies, how would you demonstrate that it's safe and it's loaded with dummies?
Yeah, so when the gun's called for on the set, the armorer should, and in instances where I was involved, it was myself and the armorer, would open up the gun and show the actor the rounds that were in the gun and explain to them, what the state of the gun was, that the gun had dummy rounds in, blanks, or whatever the case might be, because, a blank gun is still going to discharge, but it's not going to shoot a projectile out of the gun. It's just going to make a flash and a bang. So, yeah, that's something that you would explain directly to the actor. And I understand in this particular situation, that was not done.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem. David Katz, your thoughts about the fact that this armorer believes that she loaded 6 dummies in there, and one of them obviously wasn't. I mean, how difficult is it to tell the difference if you're like picking it up and physically putting it in?
It's readily apparent. But even so, I would never, under any circumstances, rely only on myself. We like redundancy. I think I mentioned on a previous occasion, when we would use, let's say, simunition training, those are a marking cartridge that agents and other law enforcement personnel use to train force on force, like during raids. So you actually have some feedback that doesn't involve getting really badly injured. So that requires sometimes a minor adjustment to your service weapon. You take your weapon apart, you insert a different barrel, you make some mechanical changes to allow it to fire simunition rounds. When you check say you have 12 people who are coming out to train, we check every single person there checks everyone else. Like I'll check everyone, I'll go to the end of the line. The next person will check. So we are doing multiple redundant levels of checking. What the armorer should do, what I would have done is empty weapon, verified, yes, dummy round going in, 1, 2, 3, until you get to 6. Check it again, show the actor, show the director, and then physically hand the gun, knowing that it's in a safe condition, to the actor. That's the only way to make sure, unless you dedicate a weapon that absolutely cannot accept live ammunition.
Yeah, we break down this whole situation. That is where the problem was. Well, first, how did the live round even end up on the set is another issue, but how does it end up in the gun, and how does the man with the gun not know what's in there because he wasn't shown? He was just handed a gun and said, it's a cold gun. Okay, you're giving me a cold gun? You always give me a cold gun. I trust you. Here we go. That's the problem, folks. That's the problem. Is it the industry standard, the way you are supposed to do it? Is it gun safety 101, or is it a violation of that? And how egregious of a violation for the armorer, for whoever brought that live round onto the set, and ultimately Alec Baldwin. So again, the jury is still out on this because the DA hasn't made up her mind. We don't know all the evidence, but we've got a much clearer picture tonight thanks to David Katz and Rob Joseph. Thank you both so much. I really do appreciate it.